that it looks a lot better when I might get the first 13 verses of chapter 10. That's probably where I'll stop. I mean, otherwise we'll just push on without slides, but and I guess we got everybody. Let me check and see if Kathy got back to me real quick. Okay. It's time. We're going to go ahead and good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I note that there may be a few who may be straggling in here, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to be continuing Chronicles today, and so as with all studies, let's go ahead and open up with prayer. Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for this day. We are so thankful for the rains that are coming. We ask that those rains be not too severe and that we not be affected by any local storms. We ask for protections in that regard. We ask that you be with those who are traveling and on the road. We ask that you keep them safe as they come here for service, as they come in, continue to come in for our Bible study. We ask that you be with Phil and Mary as they continue their travels, and be with Mike and Karen as they also are on the road and traveling. We ask that you be with those who are home due to illnesses. We ask that you be with Keith and Camille as Keith is still struggling. We ask that you be with my wife Kathy as she looks forward to a procedure for her AFib. We ask that you be with Fran. Fran is slowly improving, but they're shifting her medications a little bit, Father, and we ask that through the miracles and the healing wonders of this body with which we have been blessed, through your providential care, that she will respond to this medication and that it will get her back up and on her feet and feeling good. We ask that you be with Mary Lou as she continues to reside in the rehabilitation center. We ask that you be with all those who are unable to make it into our services today, and keep them safe until they are able to once more join us. We ask that you be with our military personnel wherever they are, and we know that they are, and our hearts go out to those who were killed in that attack based in Syria, and our prayers go out to those who are dealing with stabilizing that situation. We ask for a resolution of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, and we ask, Father, for a resolution and for protection for the nation of Ukraine as they continue to fight the aggression of their neighbor to the east. We ask for protection for all of those who seek to protect our national interests here and abroad. And we thank you so much for protecting our first responders. We note that our prayers go out to that patrolman who died in the performance of his duties here just last week. We ask that you be with the highway patrolman. We ask that you be with all of those first responders and be with those the medical personnel and the care professionals. And we ask that you be with our leaders. And Father, we ask that our leaders be brought back to your will, so that our country might once more stand as a beacon of God's will in this world. We know that that's a challenge. We know that that will always be a challenge, and we also know that governments of men are always and inherently imperfect next to your divine leadership. And we ask, Heavenly Father, that you continue to serve as our divine King, and we look forward to being with you in your kingdom. We offer this prayer in the name of your precious Son. Amen.
Amen.
So yeah, we are. I'll back just one verse here as we're starting on, and we're going to spend about all total about 30 seconds in chapter 8, I think. But I want to note that these have all been detailed genealogies of those who were basically the families before and again after the repatriation, the families that went into captivity in Babylon, in Assyria and Babylon, and those that were returned, the families those that were returned, we see that there's a detailed list of those as well. And we look at the family of Benjamin, and the reason that we want to look at the family of Benjamin, I'm going to back up right here. We see that we note that we saw a number of these genealogies that were apt to war in the battle. And we also note that historically that was God had told David not to do that, and David did it anyway. Now, Joab was not a particularly good man in those regards, in that he had tended to go off and do his own thing and did things against David's will, and eventually it got him into trouble. But one of the things that Joab did was to remind David that God told us not. He had enough religion in him that he was able to say, and I don't know whether he was using it to justify the fact that it was going to be a huge undertaking. He didn't really want to do it, but anyway, he used scripture basically to say that God told you that you weren't to number your fighting men. Okay, God said they were never to number their fighting men. That would be up to him. He would take that responsibility. And so, as a result of that, well, I remember that David was given a rather unsavory choice as to whether to inflict punishment directly upon himself or directly upon his people, and a responsibility which I believe he shirked whenever he gave that decision to God, and God made him pay for it. He made his people pay for it. That weakened David's position, I think. Okay, so now we look at First Chronicles 8, and we note the family of Benjamin. And the reason, according to most commentators, that this is here is so we can work our way down to the last verses of it. Okay, and as I look at this, I look at go to chapter 8, verse 33. I think is where we'll end up going. Go all the way down to verse 33. I note that there's a long detailed begats here, list of begats here. But the thing we want to note here is that Gibeon, the father of Gibeon, dwelt in Gibeon after they had taken over from the Gibeonites. And then we go down and we look at the descendants, and we get to Ner in verse 33, who begat Kish, and Kish begat Saul, and Saul begat Jonathan. This is the start of the king line, which God through Samuel had chosen. Okay, and Malchishua and Abinadab and Eshbaal, which means enemy of Baal. Eshbaal. It's pretty interesting that would be the case. But then we note here that bless you. We note here in verse 34 it says the son of Jonathan was Meribal, and Meribal begat Micah. Now, and I want to pass something on to you here. We go back to 1 Samuel, and we note here that the Philistines, Samuel battle against the Philistines, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan, Abinadab, and sons. And later on, we see that they caught up with died. And so there's a summary here that Saul was wounded, and he asked his armor bearer to kill him, and the armor bearer said he couldn't do it. So Saul fell on his own sword to avoid being taken captive by the Philistines. And so it's summarized by saying Saul died in 31:6. Saul died, and his 3 sons and his armor that same day together. Okay. Now we get to Chronicles. Chronicles chapter 9, verse 1. We note here that all Israel were reckoned by genealogies, and behold, they were written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah, who were carried away from Babylon for their transgressions. I should have let, who's reading? I should have let Pat read that, and I apologize, Pat, for stepping on your toes there. But we see that this is how Chronicles 9 starts, basically that the genealogies are essentially done at this point. Now, there's some that the genealogies are done, but there's also another numbering. There are two other numberings that we are going to see here as we do this. So as we get to, just read verse 2, if you would, please.
Now the first inhabitants that dwelt in their possessions in their cities were the Israelites, the priests, the Levites, and the Nephilims.
Now I note here that as I opinion, this verse 9:1 probably, and as this is exactly why, as you see here, I note that for First Chronicles 9, but the first verse of Chronicles 9, I have actually noted it is really more appropriate to be with 8. It is a summary verse that says that all the genealogies have been accounted for who were carried away to Babylon for their first transition. So what we've seen now is the genealogies that have come up to and the Babylonian invasion and the carrying away into captivity. And you note that there's not much said about the Assyrian captivity. And the reason there's not much said about the Assyrian captivity is because in Ezra's mind, they don't count anymore. Because whenever they from Judah, when they broke from what was God's succession of kings and chose their own kings, as far as he was concerned, they broke from God. And so at that point in Ezra's mind, they ceased to become relevant. Okay, so that's why you don't see anything but those descendants who remained loyal to David, and that's how Ezra and how he gathered those genealogies. Right or wrong, we see that makes these genealogies then pertinent to the repatriation of Judea, which is where we start in verse 2. Okay, which Pat just read. And I put that there in both places. But as we get to the first inhabitants that dwelled, oh yeah, I wanted to point this out. There, they were reckoned by those in the book of the Kings, and I have verse 2. She read the first inhabitants that dwelled in their possessions, and what he's talking about here is that first group that came with Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple. Okay, and so the priests and the Levites and the porters, according to Nehemiah, and some of the people and Nethinims in Israel. And when the 7th month came, the children of Israel were in their cities. This was Nehemiah, which was following on. Yeah. We look at verse 3. Go ahead and start with verse 3, if you would, please.
And in Jerusalem there dwelt the children of Judah, and the children of Benjamin, and the children of Ephraim and Manasseh. Uzziah, the son of Ammihud, the son of Amari, the son of Imri, the son of Bani, and the son of Judah.
Okay, so now we're not gonna get too awfully involved with that, because then you start with a long who were there, and of course in Ezra account as well of those who were stationed, what families were stationed where as they put together as they built the temple, and then again in Nehemiah we saw where the family where they had put the to the gates as they rebuilt the wall and rebuilt the gates of the city itself. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time there, but I do want to direct your attention to verse 11. Jump to verse 11. Actually, verse 10. We're talking about the priests that were living in Jerusalem, and those priests, Jedaiah, Jehoiarib, and Yakin, and Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Meshullam, the son of Zadok. Remember the name Zadok. The son of Marioth, the son of Ahitub. Zadok was the priest who was involved in installing David, and also in making sure that. And Zadok, of course, was actually took part in trying to deny Solomon the crown as well. How that happened, I do not recall, but we note that plan was foiled, and of course Solomon was therefore installed as the king instead, and the son of Ahitub, the ruler of the house of God. Now we're told that Jeshua, the son of Zodiac, was the high priest at that time, and Azariah is the ruler. According to Nehemiah 11, he was called Sariah by that name in Nehemiah 11:11. The rulers of the people dwelt in Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots. Remember to bring 1 of 10 to dwell in Jerusalem, the holy city, and 9 parts to dwell in other cities. Remember that they were placed around the Jerusalem, and this, of course, according to Nehemiah, they had a lottery to decide who would come. We studied that in Nehemiah, and a tenth of the population of that had repatriated Judea were assigned by lot to come and live in the city. It was a draft, if you will, of residents and also workers and also defenders of the city of Jerusalem as they the fortress that they had built it into. And so there was a list there that was brought up, and this is the list that comes here. Okay, and then we look at. I want to point out in verse 18. I don't even have that here. We get to the porters in verse 17, and they were named. Remember that the porters, those who were carrying goods, those were the Gibeonites and descendants of the Gibeonites who had tried to fool Joshua and therefore were enslaved. They were Nethinims, porters and Nethinims. Okay, and so they waited in the King's Gate eastward, and that is the gate of the temple where the kings of Judah that was specially reserved for them to enter the temple that way. And they were porters in the companies of the children of Levi. They worked for the Levites. We note that keepers of the gates, we note that they were assigned in verse 19, they refer to keepers of the entry. The reason that was the case is because they posted guards when the special services, the services of the temple, we're talking about those sacred service things, setting the showbreads out and up and setting up the candles, making sure the candles were properly lit, that the ashes were properly taken from the mouth of the inner sanctum to place in the incense burners, and that the oils and the incense were properly placed and utilized when that service was going on in preparation for the sacrifices and everything. Only the priestly class was, and this by precedent written down in Exodus, and so that is something we need to note. As we continue on, I note that you go over to verse 30, and we talk once more about prohibitions. Note that those requirements, because God wanted that done in a specific. Of course, Nadab and Abihu paid the price for not obeying that. But we also want to note that in verse 30, some of the sons of the priests made the ointments of the spices. Now, those ointments, according to the requirements of Exodus, okay, only make the sacred ointments, and they had a specific method of doing that. And of course, God gave all those plans to Moses. All right. And so they had a specific way to make that happen. And only certain people could do it. Those ointments were not used in the general populace, at least not openly, because they were specially prescribed for the ceremonies in the temple. There was a death penalty for those who were not in the priestly class, a death penalty for one who made or attempted to make that mix of ointments. Okay, so how they enforced that, I have no way of knowing, but the prohibition and the penalties were stated. Okay, and so we're going to jump down right away. Jump down to the family of Saul in verse 35. And we will go ahead and read that, but start with reading verse 35 and 36, if you would, please.
The father of Gibeon, Jehiel, his name was Maacah, and his firstborn son Abdon, and Zur, Kish, Baal, Ner. Let me go on.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and read that for you. And Gedor and Ahio and Zechariah and Mikloth. This is not the prophet Zechariah. There's only about 30 Zechariahs in the Bible. And Mikloth begat Shimeam, and they also dwelt with their brethren in Jerusalem over against their brethren. And Ner begat Kish, and Kish begat Saul, and Saul begat Jonathan, Malchishua, Abinadab, and Eshbaal. Now, this is basically a repetition. It's a repetition of chapter 8, where we talk about Gibeon, the father of Gibeon, whose wife was Maacah, and he did not found Gibeon, okay, but he was called the father of Gibeon as far as the occupation of Gibeon by the Jews, if you will, by the children of Israel. And so we see that same genealogy there, and that same mention of Saul and Jonathan and Malchishua. And the reason that there's an indication here. Remember, we mentioned in the introduction that Ezra utilized a number of sources. There were a number of lists. And this list that we're looking at here was probably a genealogy that was kept in the temple or around the temple. When the Babylonians invaded, they confiscated all of the accoutrements of the temple, and those records were probably in that. And remember that Ezra, as one of the king's scribes, had access to all that material in the library. And so he was able to find these things. He and Nehemiah borrowed, and in many cases, when he found a note, found a genealogy, he would transcribe that genealogy. And so you'll see a short genealogy that Ezra has subscribed, has mentioned, especially the list of those who were occupying the temple and occupying Jerusalem. Then you see a longer list that is brought into play, and that list he probably made that detailed record of all those that traveled with him and went to build the temple itself, the city itself, and reinforce those city walls. And so we look at we get back to first. We're at that point where we're ready now to start First Chronicles 10.
Now the Philistines.
Go ahead.
Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed Saul and his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan, Abinadab, and Massa, and the sons of Saul.
Abinadab, Malchishua, and the sons of Saul. Okay, and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. Okay, keep going.
And the battle went sore. Hit him, and he was wounded of the archers. Then Saul, draw thy sword and thrust me therein, lest this uncircumcised come and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. So Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he likewise fell on his sword and died.
Okay, and so and as we continue here directly, I want to note that this is 1 Samuel 31. And basically Ezra is taking these events and he's laying down this history remembering that he's once again repeating history for them so that they will understand the importance of this is an abject lesson in doing things God's way. Saying the line of Saul is gone, and this is why. So keep going, if you would, please.
Um,
7.
so Saul died.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and all his house died together. And when all the men of Israel that were in the valley, that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook their cities, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them.
Now, I want to note here that this army, that when Saul died, the army became so disenchanted, his soldiers basically dropped what they were doing and left. The Philistines had not made an incursion all the way up to the gates of Jerusalem ever before. And now, because of Saul's disobedience of God, the pathway is opened up to Jerusalem. Did they go the way? No, they did not. But they incurred farther into Judea than they had ever done before. The borders of Judea itself were kept relatively safe until Saul's disastrous defeat here, and then they marauded and plundered in the Judea, the nation of Judea itself. So continue on. You'll see the continuing story as related in 1 Samuel 31, repeated here. Continue, verse 8.
It came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. And when they stripped him, they took his and his armor, and sent it to the land of the Philistines round about, and to carry tidings unto their idols and their people.
So that's what they did. That's what the Philistines did. Remember, they were idol worshippers, and whenever you captured another city, you took their idols, if you will. Now, they already had the ark, so at this point now they have Saul's head, and they're going to put that right up there. So okay, so now continue on, please.
And they put his armor in the house of their gods, and fastened his head Dagon. And when all Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, they arose, all the valiant men, and took away the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons, and brought them to Jabesh, and buried their bones under the oak of Jabesh, and fasted for 7 days.
Okay, so now I want to note here that this was not just an act of valiance. For some reason, and it was a common to all of those, the Greeks did it, the Babylonians did it. When a leader fell in battle, the to regain his body, regain his remains. Those remains were basically sacred, and according to some of the Greek historians, some of the battles that were fought to recover the body of their fallen leaders were more fierce than the battle itself that was fought over a particular issue. The overriding of the battle, and as much blood was shed in many cases over of the leaders as was shed over the original issue, and I guess that's probably where that no man left behind philosophy has permeated even in our modern warfare. So we get to a summary here, verse 13 and 14.
So Saul died for his transgression, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it, and inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him, and turned the kingdom unto David, the son of Jesse.
Okay, now we finished just a little. I figured I'd get about 30 minutes out of this, and we're almost done for the day here. We'll start in chapter 11 as we look in the king of Israel, and again we'll see that a lot of this material is taken from 1st and 2nd Samuel as well. But as we look at this, we see that the summary: Saul died for his transgression which he committed against the Lord, and also which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit. asked the
Mhm.
familiar spirit to contact Samuel,
Mhm.
okay? And Samuel said,
We-
you have no business contacting me. I've already told you what's going to happen to you. And so we note that, and I want to, and as we do so, I want to go to 1 Samuel, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read 1 Samuel. I've even marked it here. I'm going to read 1 Samuel,
13.
1 Samuel 13, verses 8 through 14, if you will, and that was rendered against Saul. Remember, Saul had with the Philistines, and of course he took the battle to them, but then the sacrifice was supposed to be offered by the high priest. And Saul wanted his armies to continue, and he wanted to give thanks for the battle of Gilgal. And what happened was that Saul said, "I'll be there. I'll be there directly. I'll be there within a reasonable time." But then the people started to get restless, the soldiers, and they started to wander away because they were waiting for Samuel to show up, and Samuel never showed. He did eventually, but before that happened, and I guess this was part of the plan to test Saul and to test his resolve. Uh, uh, we see that he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. They started to leave. They started to get bored in homes, so they were there to fight, but they and there because he wanted them to continue on. He wanted to continue his campaign. But Saul said, "Bring hither a burnt offering to me and a peace offering." Now, Saul's not a priest, okay? And he offered the burnt offering, and it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering, and that's usually the way it works in the Bible, no sooner has he done what he's not supposed to do, then somebody shows up, okay? And it came to pass as soon as he had made an end of the offering, the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, "What hast thou done?" Remember, Samuel's asked that all the lowing and bleating of these sheep, whenever I had told you, when God had said, "You don't take any of that, you destroy it all." And here he is again. And Samuel says, "What hast thou done?" And Saul, I imagine Samuel already knew. Saul said, "Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed." Okay, so now he's making excuses. I note that. Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, that's that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that's excuse number 2. That the Philistines gathered themselves together at Mishmash, that's number 3. So he had that campaign out there ahead of me, wanted to do, okay? Therefore said I, the Philistines will come down now upon me to Gilgal, and I will not have made supplication unto the Lord. Job, I have not made supplication. It is not Saul's. Okay, I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. That's the 4th excuse. I had to do it. Samuel said to Saul, "Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom. God would have made you and your line forever." Okay, but now thy kingdom shall not continue. That lineage shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. All right, so that's where we get to Saul dying for his transgressions. And they inquired not of the Lord, therefore he slew him and turned the kingdom unto David, the son of Jesse. Now I want to read. Remember that we have talked about the Targum, that is a commentary, a list of commentaries, probably the oldest Old Testament commentary recorded, fragments of which have been found in the Qumran caves, which are also those writings are also called the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, and so as the Targum, the last 2 verses, the Targum speaks thus, and I'm reading from Clark's Commentaries, Volume 2, verse 14. Inquired not of the Lord. On these last 2 verses, verse 13 and 14. Okay, the Targum speaks thus. Saul died for the transgression by which he transgressed against the word of the Lord, and because he did not keep the commandment of the Lord when he warred against the house of Amalek, and because he consulted pythons, that is, snake soothsayers who played with snakes, basically. That's what python means, okay? And sought oracular answers from them. Neither did he ask counsel from before the Lord by Urim and Thummim, casting a sacred lot. For he had the priests that were in Nob. He couldn't do that because he got upset with the priests who stood against him, and he killed them. All right? Remember that these priests in Nob were part of Samuel's priestly school system, okay? So now he's warred against God at this point, okay? Therefore the Lord slew him and transferred the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. And that's where we will leave that, as we see that this is put in here for just that reason. And they're repeating the history. Now, as we go up to this, as we go through this history, we're going to once more recount those things which the kings had done. Remember that they had been warned. Samuel had warned them, and Ezra is a student of Samuel. And Samuel had warned them that when they got the kings, that God would appoint them, and regardless of the fact that God appointed them or not, they were going to do things these people were not going to like. They wanted to be like other nations and have a king, but they also wanted their own independence, and that going into those kings, assuming a kingly line other than the divine monarchy, was what resulted in the civil war that split the northern kingdom and Judea. And this background is what Ezra is building. He continues on in First Chronicles, and so we're going to see that unfold itself again, as we have already seen in First and Second Samuel's, First and Second Samuel rather, and we'll continue with this starting at chapter 11, verse 1 next Sunday morning. Are there any questions or anything? We're out of the grind of the genealogy now, when we're back to basically rehashing those things that got them sent into captivity at this point. Yes, ma'am.
Samuel's priests, well, not only did he piss off God, but he pissed off Samuel too, I think.
Well, yeah, but Samuel was not one to carry grudges. Remember that Samuel was very devout, and Samuel, and I want to note this, okay? Samuel was a prophet, but remember that this comes on the heels of Judges, okay? Of course, Ruth is inserted in there too, but this comes on the heel of Judges, and Samuel is considered by scholars to be one of the judges. Okay? One of the judges not in the book of Judges. And it may very well be that young David filled that role of judge as well whenever he slew the giant again, when they battled against the Philistines. Of course, that was at that point where God had already told Saul he was not going to be chosen. David had already been chosen. Okay? And the rest is history, as they say. Any other questions? Thanks for bearing with me as we went through this genealogy. As I say, things will get better as we go forward here. Thank you.